So I've been seeing this question asked quite a bit online now, ever since the Nobara episode of JJK, and I know a lot of people are using this to kind of meme on JJK, or to make fun of Yuji, or to just straight up slander the series, but legitimately, I do think that this is a pretty interesting question. Has Yuji suffered the most as a shonen main character? It is a good question, because obviously, when you think about, like, modern shonen and main characters within shonen, Yuji certainly has dealt with a lot in just a short time frame of, like, just 30 minutes. Like, if we think of all things considered, okay, just the events of episode 42 with Nanami's death, to the events of 43 and 44 with Nobara's death, and not even including episodes like, 41 and 40, with all of Shibuya pretty much just being annihilated by Sukuna, it's clear just in, like, 30-minute time frame, Yuji has lost so much. His very, like, world has just shattered around him. Like, he is no longer able to just straight up say he can save everybody after just what has happened continuously back to back in front of him in just these past few episodes. And in the time frame of within canon storyline, about, like, 30 minutes have happened. So this man has just dealt with just a hit to the face to the hit to the face in just, like, 30 minutes or less. So that's ridiculous. But let's get into the question. Has Yuji suffered the most? And I want to make sure I break this down. I'm only going to be counting shonen characters, so I'm not counting stuff like Berserk with Guts, because obviously Guts' suffering is just unparalleled. But I'm also not counting ReZero with Subaru, because obviously that's a very easy one too with all the deaths of Subaru, so I'm not going to count ReZero as well, because that is not technically shonen. What I'm only going to be counting here is shonen characters within Weekly Shonen Jump, and not side characters. I'm talking about main characters, okay? I want to make sure that is clarified here. I'm talking about main characters, not side characters, not like, webtoons or light novels or seinen manga. I am talking about just Shonen Jump manga. I just want to make sure I clarify that. Now, I could, argue maybe Attack on Titan could be added in here. I know it's not Shonen Jump, but I could add that in there with Eren. But I want to talk about, the main characters, because I know it'd be easy to kind of throw in maybe a One Piece character because of just how long the story is. So let's get into that. So, Yuji. Has he suffered? Yes, considerably. I think anyone in his shoes would have already been done. Like, I legitimately, if anyone was living Yuji's life, most people, like 95% of people, I think, would legitimately just want to die. Like, I legitimately believe that, if they were to live Yuji's life. Because what he's honestly went through is not something anyone should have to go through. It would break any person. And thanks to the latest episode, we literally see that. We literally see this man breaking apart, hyperventilating, not knowing what to do, and you literally see him just welcoming Mahito's attacks, like he's just willing to die. Like, if Todo did not appear in this episode, Yuji would have died. Straight up. He would have just accepted. He didn't try to dodge. He didn't try to speak back. He didn't care. He was just listening to Mahito. He was just going to die. He didn't care. And that really says a lot. Regardless of him being saved and having a slight turnaround in this episode, it means a lot that Yuji straight up just accepted death. That says a lot about his character, that he really was at his breaking point. Technically still is at his breaking point, and now he's just only holding on barely thanks to Todo being there. But, getting back into the main topic, Yuji's suffering is ridiculous. He's lost a mentor, he's lost a best friend, he doesn't really know about his teacher Gojo, but Gojo's lost, to everything with Shibuya and all the innocent lives. Yuji's very existence is also pain. I mean, his very, existence is just meant to be a vessel for Sukuna, and then to die to get rid of Sukuna. That's literally his only purpose in life. That is his own goal. Ever since the first episode, pretty much the story has presented to us that Yuji's only goal that his life has a purpose for is just to die, to get rid of Sukuna. And that is a very depressing goal. Like, that is. Like, think about, like, other shonen, okay? Luffy wants to be Pirate King. Naruto wants to be Hokage. Ichigo just wants to save his friends. We look at even Denji. He just, he wants to have a fulfilled life and just live his dreams, etc. And even though his is a little bit sad too, there is still some happiness there. It's not as depressing as Yuji's, where, like, his literal goal, technically, is just to straight up freaking die for Sukuna to be gone. Obviously, his goal, too, is to save people, but his main reason for living at this point is just to get rid of Sukuna. So that is a very depressing thought to think about. It's like, holy crap. Now, when I talk about all this, I also do think about, like, Alan Walker from D. Gray Man. There is some similarities there, and he definitely has suffered quite a bit, too. But I do think that in terms of what is going on, I think Yuji is still ahead above Alan Walker's suffering. Now, I would have to go back and reread everything, but Alan Walker has went through a lot. And I feel like The Gray Man is a heavily underrated story that not a lot of people actually read or even know about, or they might know about, they just have never read it. And I think there is a lot of psychological stuff there, and I would say Alan has suffered quite a bit too, more than people realize. But at least in the back-to-back circumstances, I do think that Yuji has suffered more. Because at the very least in D. Gray Man, there is some happiness there and some satisfaction and friends kind of still around. So I don't think it's necessarily all doom and gloom, so to speak. But backing off of that, we gotta look at other characters. Like, people are gonna be quick to point out maybe Luffy or point out Naruto and say that Naruto or Luffy has suffered more than Yuji. And let's get into that. Obviously, spoilers. I'm just gonna say. But we gotta think about it, okay? Naruto, his very upbringing, he was isolated. He was lonely, he didn't have anyone, and basically he just wanted recognition. He wanted people to acknowledge him, and that's kind of why he wanted to be Hokage. And obviously, throughout his journey, people started to recognize him. He wanted his best friend to save his best friend with Sasuke. He lost Jiraiya. He lost Neji. There was a lot of loss for Naruto, yes. But Naruto still had a lot of people around him that carried on and supported him, kept pushing him forward, and he felt a sense of belonging. Like, people really were there for him. He definitely suffered, and he had a lot of things he went through, but he legitimately definitely had, like, a lot of help around him that continuously kept him stationed, grounded, so to speak, in reality. Looking at One Piece, once again, more spoilers, Luffy, he suffered a lot when it came to, like, the loss of Sabo, to also the loss of Ace. And until he finally reunited with Sabo, he felt he was alone. And he dealt with a lot, especially being separated with his crew. He spent, like, 3 to 4 arcs basically just suffering because of, like, he was just alone. He had to fight by himself, and realizing he was weak, continuously pushed down literally into the dirt. But even in the end, he still managed to have some form of hope and happiness, and he had people and friends, even enemies that were once enemies now becoming his friends, to help him forward. And I feel like in the grand scheme of things, Luffy still had some sense of happiness even in his darkest moments. He truly wasn't completely broken until obviously Ace's death, but I do think that overall, Luffy legitimately, he pretty much had, I personally, in terms of just like trauma, was a lot easier than what Yuji has obviously went through these past few episodes. Once again, you can't really compare it, but it's still, I feel like Yuji, just the back-to-back blunt death over and over again. It's kind of like losing Ace 3 times in a row. That's kind of, what's happened to Yuji in comparison to Luffy. Like, Luffy lost Ace, which is devastating, but Yuji has lost someone, like, equivalent to Ace back-to-back 3 times over. Just, that's wild. But, anyways, moving off of that, let's think of other characters. Let's think of a good example, a parallel people are going to use, is Denji. Denji, as a character, obviously has went through a lot. I mean, holy crap. That he has a really crap life. Like, anyone that has read the manga, at least part 1, knows his life is not a life you want. No, you don't want that life. Especially just looking at the beginning of how he had to, like, give up his eye and, just everything about his life, how he lived with his parents and all that. Just, no. You don't want that life. You legitimately wouldn't want to be Denji. And I think that Denji is definitely comparable to a degree. His life is just straight up pain. It is pain. But thanks to his ignorance, he had a lot of happiness. And I felt like because of that, he was able to be happy. He was able to be pleased with things that came his way. Even if it was very miserable or suffering, his life was legitimately okay to him. Until obviously later on in part 1, because he became aware of what he lacked or didn't have. And so that's what made it very painful for him. But if we're looking at the beginning portions of Denji, his life technically to him wasn't really that bad because he didn't really know what he didn't have. So that gets into the part with Yuji's character. Yuji knows what he has, he knows what he lost, and he just continuously loses. And he's in a world that just doesn't like him. Like, the world legitimately hates Yuji. And I feel like, if you didn't know any better, you'd feel like Gegi, the author of JJK, hates Yuji. And the world is not kind to him. It's not giving him handouts. It's not wanting to hold his hand and give him a super massive power-up. Usually in, series like Jujutsu Kaisen that has like a cursed spirit or something inside of you, like, think of the Nine Tails inside Naruto. Yeah, even though they're not really good for you, they come around and help you out in dark times, technically, and help you. Sukuna isn't like that. Sukuna doesn't come and appear to try to say, yeah, okay, I'll help you this time or whatever. Sukuna's just like, nah, screw you, just suffer. That's literally what he's like. And I think that the big point here is that Yuji can't even rely on Sukuna. And he has no one that, can really understand his pain because he legitimately is alone. He is isolated, and it continuously keeps happening to him. And Mahito as a villain, which I think is the best thing that's happened to the story, Mahito's a great villain for, Yuji, because he destroys Yuji's very self-esteem, what he is. And I think that is a good element to what makes a good villain as well, is that a villain should always challenge the MC's ideology. Like, just challenge him and rip it apart. And that's what I think makes it so good, is that Mahito has continuously proven to Yuji that he will destroy him, rip him apart, and show what he believes in is not okay. He's so naive, and that, just those two, Mahito and Yuji cannot exist in the same world. That one of them has to go. And I think that it's just very interesting, writing-wise, what Mahito has done to Yuji as a character. He continuously torments him and makes his life a living hell. So getting back into the actual OG question, has Yuji suffered the most? Honestly, in terms of main shonen, like if we're talking about modern shonen, I would say yes. I haven't read every shonen decades ago, obviously. There's many shonen I haven't read, so I can't really put him up against other series, but I will think, if we're talking about recent stuff, at least in modern day shonen in the last decade, I would say, I would definitely think that Yuji probably has. The only one incomparable, I would probably say Eren. I would actually only put Eren alongside of Yuji. I know there's hot opinions about Attack on Titan, but I mean, besides obviously thinking about the plot and the storyline, we just got to think about the character, and Eren's life is technically horrible too. So that's the only character I would say would be comparable to the suffering, because it's awareness. Both characters were aware of what was going on and the suffering and all that. They weren't ignorant like Denji was, so that's what I'm trying to kind of do a baseline on. So yeah, Yuji's life is suffering. Who do you think has suffered the most? Honestly, let me know in the comments below. I'm legitimately curious, but I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much for watching. Be safe, stay healthy. Chibi out.